going to say that you served in a war that you weren't in, then that goes back to the question of honesty.
But doesn't that
so I would
deflect,
draw those distinctions.
Doesn't that deflect from what Tim Walz, the issue that he's actually brought up, which is there shouldn't be any military-style assault weapons on the streets in the hands of civilians? Because that's what he was talking about. To me, when you start bringing up...
Well, I think there's a few different things going on in the Tim Walz situation. There is evidence in interviews and otherwise that he suggested he served in Afghanistan when he didn't, and that he actually did know before that he was going to be called to Iraq before he decided to actually go run for Congress. I'm not in the business of questioning his service at all, but when you're asking the question, and you haven't heard me talk about this general topic in the media at all myself, but if you're asking me, is it fair game for Republicans to go after him for lying to the public? Yes. Is it smart or a good idea to go after him for military service? No. But I think that for lying to the public, for somebody who's going to be vice president of the United States, that is, I think, a worthy line of attack.
Deflecting from the issue of gun violence.
Well, my whole thing is let's focus this on policy. Let's have a debate on the merits of policy and where you land. Now, Tim Walz, it's interesting. As a governor, you may or may not agree with the policies, but he is a governor who has increased the tax burden in Minnesota. He favors higher capital gains taxes for people who live in Minnesota. It's one of the highest tax states in the country. It's not California or New York. It's a Midwestern state. Got by far the highest tax burden of anywhere in the Midwest.
Taxes in this country are gonna kill it. You know what I'm saying? The oldest generation has been paying taxes for 60 years, 50 years. And they're still paying taxes. People don't work. Government takes too much money because it spends too much money on dumb policies.
West. He is somebody who believes in a lot of the restrictions on fossil fuels. I don't know where you all are on that issue. I'm dead set against much of the climate change agenda because I think it leaves Americans of every political persuasion worse off. Tim Walz, as a governor, has been one of the most aggressive. Some people might like it. People like me don't. But he's been one of the most aggressive on implementing climate change policies, even at the state level. So those are legitimate lines of attack that I think we're not going hard enough on as Republicans because we're focused on other issues.
Go ahead. I was going to say, well, back to Kamala, do you think that, because you said, like, you can't get to her hard policy, but everybody's having so much conversation about her race and what she said versus what she didn't say.
I think this actually helps Kamala, to be clear.
No, it does help
even
her.
From a strategist perspective, from a Republican standpoint, she gives us a lot to focus on by way of policy criticism. We're actually missing that opportunity right now. So I'd like to see that change in the next 3 months, and I think the country would be better off for it. I also don't favor, I said this even when Joe Biden was running for president. So there's a pledge that the Republican Party required you to sign to be on the debate stage. Last year, so I did the Republican primary debate. It was called the Beat Biden Pledge. I said this is a nonsensical idea for 2 reasons. Okay, one is I don't think we're going to be running against Biden. Turns out that ends up being the case. Yep. But the second reason is we're not going to succeed for the country or at the ballot box by just railing against the radical Biden agenda. We have to stand for our own vision for the country. What do we actually stand for, not just what are we against? And so if we make that same mistake with respect to Kamala Harris, I don't think we're running against an individual candidate. I think we're running against a machine. And what I'd like to see as her vision is we want to go in and dismantle that machine. That's what Draining the Swamp was actually about. That's why you had that dragon energy in 2016. And I think there's nonpartisan, bipartisan interest in saying that, you know what, we do live in a country where a bureaucracy crushes the will of the citizens. Go in and break that system. That's a powerful and I think unifying message. And so I'm not a big fan of going after just one individual candidate because it misses the point of what we're up against. For Kamala Harris's part, though, I think she owes the people of this country an answer. Where does she stand on nationalizing healthcare? Are you for it or are you against it? Where do you stand? This is a big one that people don't talk about. Affects small business owners, including black and white business owners across the country. She favors what's called a tax on unrealized capital gains. What that means is, even if you have a business, you're a businessman too, right? So you're operating a business, but take somebody who's maybe in a tougher position than you are. That means you have to pay taxes even when you don't have the cash to pay those taxes because the government says that it's worth something and you have to pay 25% of that value every year. Well, what if you don't have the cash in your pocket? That forces you to either sell your business, take out a loan to pay taxes. That's a formula for real economic calamity. She has consistently supported that. That's what we need to be talking about. Are you still in favor of it? If so, why? Let's have that policy debate.
But
And I think that hiding from those issues is something that leaves the American people holding the bag.
She'll get to that, I'm sure, when the debates come and everything else. And
We
when
only
she
have 3
does-
months.
when she does interviews. I agree with that. I want that.
No. Hold on, real quick. What do you don't have a standard for her, my guy? Like you, the reporter. You asked about race. The other one asked about race, but you just gonna dismiss that. You're not gonna hold her accountable for anything.
If you think about the flip flopping too, isn't that what politicians do though? And what I mean by that is JD Vance was calling Trump America's Hitler, right? But now when it comes to Trump, he's the Hawk Tuah girl. Like he's just he's sucking him off every chance he gets, and that's what a lot of y'all do. Like just politicians in general. You hear so many different Republicans.
But you say Republicans, you say politicians. Why don't you say that? Why don't you say Kamala was about sucking something off?
I said so many negative things about Donald Trump, but then as soon as he becomes the nominee, everybody just falls in line.
And normally they fall in line in unison, and you can rage against the machine. It doesn't feel like Trump and Vince are
stay
like
in line.
it's not there. Like,
So what do you
Been
call
in
that?
line
That's
with the
flip-flop.
Democrats.
So here's what I will
are
say
you
is
talking
it
about?
fair game to press J.D. Vance hard on why he said certain things about Donald Trump before versus what his view is on Donald Trump today? Yes, I think that's fair game. And has he been pressed and has he answered for that?
What did
yes,
Kamala
he has.
say about Biden?
What I would love to see is both candidates, and Kamala Harris hasn't done this yet. I'd love to challenge her to do it because I think it's good for the voters of the country. She hasn't sat down for one media interview of a hard-pressing one-on-one variety yet. And she's actually the leading candidate now in many of the polls for U.S. president. So I just think we deserve a country where the people are willing to show up. She should show up here. She should show up on CNBC, where I was this morning, and actually engage in hard questions about what her beliefs are. You saw JD.
Time. You know Charlamagne's not going to answer our questions. Stop.
Say what you will. On
Watched
3
him all
shows
day yesterday.
pressed on
Watched him.
exactly that very
Yeah.
issue. And I think that's good for the American people to then be able to make their own judgment. It's not your judgment or a journalist's judgment, but it's what people at home are able to see to assess. Do I actually believe somebody who believes they changed their mind over the course of time? Kamala Harris might have changed her mind, and I think it's okay. Flip-flopping is one thing, changing your mind thoughtfully is another. But you deserve to be questioned on it, and it's up to the voters to decide whether or not they believe you. Right now, we're not getting that chance. And I do think it is, you're saying, well, hopefully we're going to see that. I'm not sure yet that we will. It's been about a solid month that Kamala Harris has been the presumptive nominee. We got the convention coming up, this coming week, next week. I think it is vital for the health of this country that the same treatment that the media gave Joe Biden in that last few weeks after his debate, they didn't do that for 3 years.
Yeah.
For 3 years, we missed that. The fact that it took that early debate and Donald Trump demolishing him in that debate for the country to suddenly wake up and say that Joe Biden is not a functioning U.S. president is actually a damning indictment of the entire media and its relationship to the political class. So we can't make that same mistake with Kamala Harris. I think the media needs to demand that she at least face the same kind of questioning that, frankly, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are getting right now. And then the public, it's up to them to decide. That's a functioning democracy.
But again, you're not implying by her not doing the interviews and based off of the way that Biden was treated in those last couple of weeks, you're not implying that you don't think she's competent to be the president of the United States,
No,
right?
I'm
don't
saying the
think
media is
she's
covering
confident.
for her right now the same
What's
way
wrong
they
with
covered
that?
for Biden for 3 years.
You think they're covering, or you think that she's just using her
They're
own
not playing
strategy?
hard. They're not paying this. She's using a strategy. Okay, I think she's using
It's
some
a
smart
political
Politicians
strategy.
do.
That's fine, but I think it's the media's job now to cut through that strategy and say this person very well could be the president of the United States. Has at least a 50% chance right now, according to most forecasts, of being the next president. She deserves to be questioned, not with kid gloves, but questioned with the gloves
Oh,
off
they're not
on
gonna
what
do that.
exactly her policy
They're
vision is for
giving
the
her
country.
excuses.
Until that happens, I think the voters are hiding in the dark. And that's what allows the machine to work, because we know she's questioned a lot on that behind closed doors. Who's funding the campaigns of both parties? Behind closed doors, a lot of donors ask a lot of questions. That's how you raise hundreds of millions of dollars in just 1 month. The voting public deserves that same level of transparency. And one of the things I will, say what you will about, you could criticize either side. I like that Donald Trump showed up at the Libertarian Party convention, right? That's a third party. They had a convention. I actually spoke there. He spoke there as well the next night. I like that he spoke to the National Association of Black Journalists in Chicago I'd love for Kamala Harris to show up at the National Association of Black Journalists.
Well, she wanted
and
to, but
face-
they wouldn't let her do the virtual thing. Yeah, she does have a day job.
But the day
still
job,
vice president.
No, but the day job is running.
Another
At this
excuse-
point, she is going
another
full time,
excuse, dude?
running,
Yeah,
reading off a
this dude
teleprompter at
is
the rallies,
so
the same thing
soft.
4
He's
times a
so
day.
soft.
She should show up for that interview. If
Probably
Donald Trump
because,
sits down with the National Association of Black Journalists, I'm sorry. A scheduling excuse is not a valid reason for the
But don't we know what
competitor to also show up.
But if Kamala, not to cut you off, I'm sorry. If Kamala sits down with NABJ, we know where she's going conversation wise, right? I think it's honestly,
Not necessarily true. I don't think that's true. I think the person who did that interview for Donald Trump.
Did you just hear the reporter pretend like she knew what Kamala was going to... That's the whole point right there. That's disgusting. This isn't disgusting.
If they had taken the same approach with respect to Kamala Harris, I think that'd actually be pretty good conversation for the
I
country.
don't know if she would.
I don't
I
think
want
it
to see her.
would've
I
been-
want to see the vice
Yeah, I
president
wanna-
on Fox News.
Yeah, I think she
Even
should go
better.
across the
Even
room.
better.
Yeah.
Even better, right? So one of the things I liked, I mean, Donald Trump went to the Bronx. People could say it wasn't the real Bronx or
I wanna
whatever, but
see
he
her on
showed up in
Fox
the Bronx.
News.
He showed up in South
I wanna
Bronx.
see her
Showed up in inner
the
cities
white
in the country. Even in my own
journalist
campaign, I went to the south side of Chicago.
Association.
Went to a room full of what, 95% black, 95% Democrat. It's not a traditional Republican primary location. I went to Kensington in the inner city of Philadelphia. Speaking as a former candidate myself, I can tell you those trips had an impact on me, right? It had an impact on my view of a national unity that I believe is possible in this country that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't showed up there. I'd love to see Kamala Harris go into rural Mississippi, go into Alabama, showing up at a Fox News moderated town hall.
Well, she does do that. Now we can't act like she doesn't do that. I mean, even the past week, she hit all of the battleground states, and she's actually hitting the street, which I think in a lot of ways is more effective right now than sitting
With
down
hostile
doing an
questioning,
interview.
though, is not.
No.
I want to see her
That's what
answer
I'm
questions
saying.
from people who disagree with her. That's what the country's founded on. All right, so face
Charlamagne,
off
you're
with the
weak,
people you
bro.
disagree with.
So like town halls, you mean?
Yeah, town
I'm
halls
not mad at that.
and or hostile
So then bring it
journalists.
up. If you ain't mad at it, you keep saying all this mad about, but you don't bring it up. You're a fraud. You a fraud. You want to know why? Because you ain't ever voted Republican. And that's the truth. Which means you're also...
And here's why. When you stop talking to
Not
people,
hostile, hard hitting.
hard hitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to say, because
Oh,
you see
no.
a black woman in a hostile situation. Did you see that when you went to the new places? She gonna know how to handle it. She gonna be good.
I hope so.
She
We'll,
said
we'll,
she's
we'll,
black.
I hope so for the country. But here's what I will say: is when you stop talking to people who disagree with you, it becomes a lot easier to demonize them.
I agree.
And,
I agree with
and
that.
I
that's
agree
and that's
with
what
that.
happens in the country. So say what you will about, I know we probably have different views on who we're voting for this cycle, but I will say more so than most Republicans, and in this cycle more so than the Democratic opponent, Donald Trump has talked to people who disagree with him, faced off
I
more
agree with you.
than Kamala Harris has, and I think she has a couple months left to see if she has it in her to level up. If you want to sit across the table from Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, then you better be willing to sit across the table from your fellow Americans who disagree with you and face that questioning too. And that's my challenge to her. If she does that, I'm not going to say I'm going to vote for her, but because I disagree with her on the policies, but I will respect her as a candidate in a way that I don't until she actually
So
does it.
you're
not just
giving
gonna
her
support your fellow
3.5
Indians?
years?
She's an
Well,
And now she's
I would
Indian?
say that one thing's actually funny you bring that up in the.
Why you bring
I
it
believe we're all
up,
American, we
dog?
gotta vote
It's
in
you
policy,
who
of
bring
course.
it up.
A lot of the Indian American
What a
community is a
joke.
little bit
What a
disappointed
joke.
or a little bit offended, at least at the fact that she doesn't really own that part of her identity
not
anymore.
true. Why
And
do
the way
y'all
she
say
did
that?
before, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just
She owns both.
I'm don't blame
Both.
Messenger here, but I'm telling you, just you can take it as a fact that a good,
No.
at least in my read of it, I think a lot of Indian Americans do have a little bit of disappointment about that. My whole view is I don't like identity politics, period, right?
Yeah,
One
why are you
direction
bringing
or
it up?
another. We got to revive our shared American identity. Okay, and so if we are really committed to the ideals of this country, I think we should focus on what policies are you advancing regardless of your race, regardless of your skin color. So whether she's dealing with a tax or she's dealing with leaning into it, I'm against it in both forms. Forget the identity politics around the board and focus on how you're going to have policies that lift up all Americans. That's what I favor talking about. But since you bring it up, I'm just don't shoot the
That's the
messenger here.
American dream, but-
I think there are some Indian Americans out there that do feel some sense of offense about
Well,
it.
I want to tell Indian Americans that's not true. She claims both sides, black and Indian. And this is my last question because I know you got to go.
There he
What were
goes.
your thoughts when Ann Coulter told you that she wouldn't vote for you because you're Indian? She told you that verbatim.
Yes, you are an Indian, is what she said. So look, I think it's shameful. I disagree with it deeply. But one of the things that I think we need more of in this country, the only thing worse than
It's
that,
a free world.
is her not
Free
saying it,
country.
but that actually being a true fact for why many people wouldn't vote for me.
But you know, it's a lot of
So
people
let's
in
get
the
it out in the
party.
open,
A
and
lot
let's
of
talk
people in
about
the party who look at you like that, though. I mean, it's the same party that would make
Yeah.
racist jokes about you, draw the racist cartoons.
Well, here's one of the things I actually haven't mentioned this before. One of the things that bothered me a little bit in the campaign is maybe it's because of my style or whatever. A lot of people in the Republican primary base would say, "Oh, he's just telling us what we want to hear," and I don't think that he actually means it or believes it. I got that a lot actually. Thought about it after the race. If I really wanted to tell you what you wanted to hear, do you think I would tell you that I'm a Hindu who practices my beliefs without changing or shortening my last name? So if I'm going to stick to that, you have a lot of politicians in American politics, including other people on that debate stage, that have changed their name, some who have evolved their religion. I haven't done any of those things. So if I wanted to tell you something that was going to make it easier for me to win, those would be the number one and two things that you would do. But my view is you got to be who you are. And I am somebody who has my own beliefs. And I am proud of not only my faith, because it guides me to make the decisions I do, but who I am and how I got to where I am. Now, I think in the long run, and I've met many people in the Republican primary base across the entire country, I think in the long run, people do respect that level of authenticity and commitment. And so are there going to be a lot of people who, on either side of the spectrum, to say, I can't vote for you for some silly reason? Sure. But I'm not going to be a victim over that. You know what? If I'm running to be president of the United States, I can't blame the media. I certainly can't blame the voters. It's my job to actually give people a reason to say, you know what, you might have believed what you did before, but here's your reason to think about it a little bit differently. And I think we did bring along a lot of people who believed they could have never voted for a Hindu, who said that, you know what, if he shares the same value set that I do and is actually going to advance the country and allow me to be religiously free, I think there were a few people who we brought along that way, more than a few people, over the course of the campaign. And, you know, I think one of the things I learned is I preach this to the left all the time, right, is that I won't say that you're the only person who's responsible for your destiny, because there's always external factors that hold you back, external prejudices or whatever. You and I, in our last conversation, talked about this a lot in the black community, but you could say the same thing in this context. You're talking about me and my race for president. Okay, maybe you're not the sole determinant of what you achieve in life. Fine. But the most important determinant of what you're able to achieve in life is still you. There are other factors, but the number one factor that determines whether or not you succeed or achieve your goals is you. So for me, now I got to preach that hard truth to myself. Are there a lot of factors that were uphill factors for me in this race, including my last name being harder to remember or to pronounce, the fact that I'm Hindu, which you haven't had a Hindu president before, or there are a lot of other reasons why? Sure. But the number one reason why I wasn't successfully elected comes still down to me. And I got to look and confront myself in the mirror and ask myself what I could have done better to succeed. And so same message I'm going to preach to the left or preach to the other side, I'm going to try to practice in my own life as well. If you want to be the leader of the country, it's up to you to level up and actually explain to people why you believe that your vision is going to be best for them. And you know what? It was a hell of an experience, and I wouldn't trade it off for anything. It's been probably the most challenging but most enriching thing I've done in my life was the last year of traveling this country, meeting people of all creeds, all political persuasion, all races, strengthened me. And you know what? Whatever I do next, I'm going to be stronger for it. We're figuring that out right now.
So with all that being said, you think the Republican Party will have a person of color as a presidential nominee at some point?
I think it's entirely possible. Yeah, I think it's entirely possible.
If it's not always about race, why is everybody always asking about, especially the reporters? If Kamala's race don't matter, then why are they bringing it up all the time? If someone's skin color doesn't matter, then why do they always bring it up? So damn hypocrisy.
Possible in the near future. Even if you look at even 2016, Ben Carson at one point led in the polls. If you look at 2012, number one for a little while was Herman Cain as
young
well.
lady. So what are you talking
And that's 2012. I think we're even different in 2024 relative to 2012.
So silly.
Frankly, even in the race that I had, I mean, I was running, briefly ahead of Ron DeSantis at the early parts of the debates that put me at number 2 next to Donald Trump at certain points in the race. So were there some headwinds for me? You got Ann Coulter's comment. Was that representative of a broader current? Yeah, that exists. But was that the reason why I did not succeed, or am I going to pin the blame on that? No. I think it comes down to everybody has their own unique challenges. People have biases of all kinds. It comes in a lot of different flavors. But if you're running to lead the country, It's up to you to overcome that. Is that surmountable? Yeah, I believe it is. And do I think that at some point in our lifetime you're going to have somebody who is not a white man be the Republican nominee and successfully elected U.S. president as a Republican? I think definitely. I think overwhelmingly likely.
I think they should have made Nikki Haley the nominee this year.
I disagree with that.
Or put her as vice president. It would have been a tougher ticket to beat than this.
I mean, I disagree with that based on ideology because she and I have deep-seated different views about our appetite to enter
Your views are different
conflict.
than Trump.
Yeah, I have a lot of different views than Trump.
You don't really like Trump's politics, Vivek.
Well, I've been very clear that I don't agree with Trump on 100% of policies. I ran for president. For a year, I was making clearly the case of where I have some slightly different policy views than Donald Trump. Hopefully that makes actually my reason for endorsing him at least credible to the people who followed me during the race to say, I'm not changing my policy positions. I still don't agree with him on 100% of policies. But I'm voting for him nonetheless because I think he's going to grow the economy and solve the illegal mass migration crisis, which I do think is hurting this country. And I think those are the two issues that matter most to the next 4 years of our development. But think about the future. This actually, we don't cover this ground, and maybe you guys aren't interested in this either, but I think there are different flavors of America First beneath the surface, simmering right now. I think it's interesting. It's in the very early stages of this. On one strain of America First, it's the idea that we need to protect American manufacturers from the effects of foreign price competition, that we need to protect American labor from the effects of legal immigration into the country. I'm not so much in that camp. I'm in the camp of America First that says the federal bureaucracy is actually the main thing holding back this country. So I don't want to replace the left-wing nanny state with a right-wing nanny state. I want to actually shut down the nanny state. I don't want to replace the left-wing regulatory state with a right-wing regulatory state to advance so-called good goals. I actually just want to dismantle the regulatory state. And that's an interesting, there's two different currents within even